All right. Good morning to my people, man. Back at y'all with some more content. And today, man, I'm pretty sure you can see the title. We're talking about the Black Seminoles and Afro Mexicans and the racism that they deal with in Mexico. Now, I touched on this subject a few times, and some of the Mexicans who watch my channel say, "Oh, you keep talking about Mexicans." Hey, man, I talk about the things that people want to hear. A lot of people didn't know this. A lot of people are getting educated about history. So, as long as the people enjoy it, I'll continue to make content about this. Because like I said, a lot of people didn't even know about Afro Latinos, Afro Mexicans in particular. A lot of people never knew about them. So, I'm shedding light on their existence. And this is history right here, man. This is what you call hidden history. History that's not really talked about, man. So I feel good about, shedding light on this subject, shedding light on this situation. You know, um, yes, true indeed. Shout out to my people. Tap on in. It's early in the morning. It is 7:42 a.m. on the West Coast. The Black Seminoles. Now listen, we're gonna talk about the Black Seminoles who went to Mexico. Now the Mexican cat tell me like, oh man, it's not true. Uh the Black Seminoles are not descendants of FBA. I said, man, you're crazy. He didn't know it. And the guy is like at least in his 50s. I'll say at least this dude gotta be in his mid 50s. And you had another guy who's about 50 as well who kept trying he tried to convince people in my audience that the Black Seminoles were not descendants of FBA. I said, man, a lot of you people just don't know history. You just don't know history, and you've been brainwashed by Spanish conquistadors. It's it's a sad thing, man. But when you think about a lot of Mexicans, they were never taught this. So when they hear a black person speaking on it, the first thing they want to say is, "No, no, it's not true," because their family never taught them about real Mexican history. You know, they might know about Mexican history to a certain extent, but when I spoke on the Black Seminoles, a lot of Mexicans never know about their existence. They thought I was just making something up. You know, they said, "No, you're just making it up, man. There's no such thing as a Black Seminole." So yeah, man, that's just the reality of the situation. So we're gonna continue to shed light on this history right here, this hidden history. This right here is a gem. This is what you call a gem, a hidden jewel. Look at it like this, man. Mexico barely acknowledged the existence of Afro Mexicans, maybe like 2019. So if you're hiding history, if you're hiding something, then we already know what that is. Like, why would you want to? But then again, I'm not going to say why would you. It's pretty obvious why they would do that. All I'm saying is, it shows the anti-blackness that's in Mexico. It's like when you go out of your way to hide somebody's existence, then that's a clear sign of racism. That's a clear sign of anti-blackness. I mean, Mexico went out of their way to hide these people from their senses. You know, they refuse to acknowledge their existence. Because I've heard people try to say, I heard people say, oh, Mexico is just so welcoming and this and that, but they never talk about the anti-black racism that goes on there. You know, they hide it. And it's just one of those things. Detroit 313 said Taco Bell Whopper church raps. You crazy. You crazy. Bless the like button if you haven't already. Mexico went centuries without acknowledging the existence of Afro Mexicans. And now, when you look at the census, they're considered Afro Indigenous. Now, right now in this video, man, I want to shed some light on the Black Seminoles and how the Black Seminoles ended up in Mexico. Let's get into this content, man. We ain't gonna waste no time.
El Día de los Negros, or Day of the Blacks, celebrated on Juneteenth in a town called Nacimiento. These are the sights and sounds of El Día de los Negros, or Day of the Blacks, celebrated
the Day of the Blacks
on Juneteenth in a town called Nacimiento de los Negros in Coahuila, Mexico.
My name is Ashley Rodriguez.
Celebrated in a town, and that's like pretty close to Texas right there.
My name is Ashley Rodriguez, and I'm a descendant of the Black Seminole Indian. My first time actually going to Nacimiento, I was a Seminole Indian.
Or Day of the Blacks, celebrated on Juneteenth in a town called Nacimiento de los Negros in Coahuila. See
how close that is to Texas? You had a lot of blacks in Mexico City at one particular time too, and most of your Afro-Mexicans are in the southern region of Mexico, like way down here. This is where you can find the pyramids in Mexico.
Mexico.
My name is Ashley Rodriguez, and I'm a descendant of the Black Seminole Indian. My first time actually going to Nacimiento, I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old. And then from then on, we'll kind of make trips periodically down to Nacimiento to celebrate Juneteenth. Nobody really knows about the Mexican side of it.
Nacimiento de los Negros, which translates to birthplace of the blacks, is the town where the Black Seminoles, or Negros Mascogos, settled in 1849, just a few hours.
Look at that music, man.
South of the Texas border. They are descended from slaves who escaped to Florida and later made their way down to Mexico.
We're talking about the 18th century, more or less. When they got to Florida, they mixed culturally with the Indian Seminoles, and they became the Black Seminoles. They were removed during the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma, which was then the.
See, this guy tried to tell me, oh, they were just allies. There was no mixing of the blacks and the Seminoles in Florida. I'm like, man, you just need to quit talking, man. You know, I was speaking to this Mexican dude, and he kept coming with this Spanish conquistador history. I'm like, miss me with that Spanish conquistador history, man. What are you talking about? Trying to tell me they didn't mix, they just helped each other out. I said, man, just be quiet.
That they mixed culturally with the Indian Seminoles, and they became the Black Seminoles. They were removed during the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma, which was then the Indian Territory.
So once they got to Oklahoma, where they told them that they would be free and have land, they realized that it wasn't true, it was a lie, and they can come and take them anytime they wanted to, the masters. So they decided, you know, they had to leave.
So it was a very harsh, terrible journey that our people had to go through to get to freedom. They didn't allow them freedom there in Oklahoma. And John, Horse, and Wildcat, they heard, you know, that there's a place in Mexico that they could go to, that they could be free.
Mexico needed to hire people to defend the border from the possibility of more U.S. invasion. So what happened with the Black Seminoles is that they managed to negotiate a deal with the Mexican state in exchange for land and citizenship.
Karina and Dina grew up knowing little about their heritage, but are now dedicated to preserving their stories.
We knew that my grandfather on my mom and my dad's side, they were both black Seminoles, so we didn't know anything else. That's what we're working with, my cousins and I, on, teaching.
Exactly, school. They're ashamed of that. They're ashamed of that history right there. So they pretend like it doesn't exist and they don't talk about it. Those who do know about it, they pretend like it doesn't exist and they hide it. Then you have some who just don't know. Some of them are just ignorant to the history. But you got to think, Mexicans were taught to erase anything black or to deny any blackness, any black history of Mexico. They've been indoctrinated to feel that way about black people. So when you tell them about this, they pretend like, no, no, it's not true. This is just your Afrocentric beliefs. It's not true. Yeah, right.
Teaching the history and preserving, the traditions.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Allah will be thy name.
One of our cousins, Bertha Benson, had did a YouTube video for Siska, and it was talking about how the Seminole language was a lost language. And I didn't want that language to be lost, because that's part of my history, that's part of my family. So that's when I started to research more and learn about my history.
Part of remembering their traditions is traveling to Nacimiento every year on Juneteenth to celebrate with the town.
We have June 19 in Mexico, but we didn't know it as June 19. We knew it as El Baile de los Negros, El Día del Negro. We take food, drink.
Yeah, like I said, man, any racial slurs, will be erased. So don't put no racial slurs in my chat. Thank you.
Because that's mainly what it is. It's like a big party, like a big family reunion.
Celebrating Juneteenth, it's more how I perceive it. It's with my ancestors freeing themselves from slavery, unlike with the American government being the ones to initiate it. It means so much to me. It means that for one, I am also a unique individual that comes from such a rich history that is so unknown. With the recent events that have happened here within the past years, with, of course,
Beautiful woman. She's a descendant of the Black Seminoles. Beautiful lady.
so unknown. With the recent events that have happened here within the past years, with, of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all of that, I feel that I'm also a part of that community. Since we are descendants of African descent, we also tie into that as well.
See? Listen to that.
I feel that I'm also that comes from such a rich history that is so unknown. With the recent events that have happened here within the past years, with, of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all of that, I feel that I'm also a part of that community. Since we are descendants of African descent, we also tie into that as well.
Boom. Okay. So there it is. Whoop, there it is. Yeah. Let's get into this Phil Scott interview. So yeah, man. So
well, about 3 years ago,
you're not just descendants of that. You're a descendant of FBA. If you're a Black Seminole, then you can trace your bloodline back to chattel slavery in Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama. So all you Afro-Mexicans who are Black Seminoles, you could trace your ancestry back to the slave trade in Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina. You can trace your lineage back to chattel slavery. So the Black Seminoles were foundational Black Americans. They are foundational Black Americans who mix and blended. You had the Black folks, the runaway slaves, and they mixed with the Seminoles, and then they became the Black Seminoles. I had to educate a whole lot of people on this subject, mainly Mexicans. White people knew this, Black people knew this, but a lot of Mexicans was in denial about it. Hit the like button.
I conducted an interview with, one of our sisters, Brenda Smith Lazama. Now, Brenda, I met her about actually 4 years prior at an event in Atlanta. Now,
this is a beautiful Afro-Latina woman right here. Beautiful woman. And she's going to give you her experience. She's going to speak on her experience with anti-black racism in Mexico and Latin America in general. So let's hear what she has to say.
Mom is Mexican and her dad is Panamanian, but he's black. And we got to talking about, at least in that interview, about the Afro.
Okay, so her mom is Mexican,
but he's black. And we years prior at an event in Atlanta. Now, Brenda's mom is Mexican and her dad is Panamanian, but he's black. And we got to talking about, at least in that interview, about the Afro Latinos in Mexico, how they are treated, and also about how some of them want to identify, not the Afro Latinos, but how some of them in Mexico want to identify as white and have camaraderie, with white people, versus when you seeing the issues when it comes to what happens when they come over across that border, United States of America, and they come with already the anti-black racism, and they want to buddy up and get cool, with the white supremacists the moment they get here, is because that's what they was already trying to do in their country. So let me roll a clip real quick, what Brenda was discussing, and let's talk about that. You mentioned earlier about the Afro Latinos in Mexico being marginalized. I mean, could you expound on that? Like, they're prevented with essential services, like what they're actually doing to them to marginalize them?
What I mean is, like, the physical marginalization, I mean that literally Afro-Latino communities are found on the periphery of the country. So it's not always super common to find, for example, communities of Afro-Latinos or large communities of Afro-Latinos living in the heart of Mexico City or in the heart of Guadalajara or whatever it may be. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but I'm saying that you have to remember, Mexico is about 1% Afro-Latino, 1% Black. So the majority of that 1% is located around the coast.
What is even though they're low in population, but I've heard other people like this straight from Mexico say this, is that there is a particular racism against black people. Now the question I'm gonna ask you is, what did black people do to them to cause that?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
From my point of view. I think that it is something that has been passed along so much. I actually have somebody in my family who at one point was staying with us, and I found a journal that had been written, talking about all these racial slurs and referring to my dad, in derogatory ways, and he would refer to himself as white. And I would say, you are Latino, who is a descendant, most realistically, you're probably a descendant of a mix of Native and Spanish ancestors, but you want to identify so badly as well.
They didn't have to do anything to them. They were brainwashed by the Spanish conquistadors. That's where the anti-blackness come from. Prior to the Spanish conquistadors showing up in Mexico, nobody had that mindset. So that's where Mexicans get their anti-blackness from, the Spanish conquistadors.
White, and denigrate somebody bad, in derogatory ways, and he would refer to
Make sure that you guys bless that like button. I mean, it's all over Latin America. Nobody thought like that until them conquistadors showed up. The Spanish conquistadors whitewashed Mexico, whitewashed Mexicans. They whitewashed Latin America. That's where that anti-black mindset came from. All facts, baby. Bless the like button. It ain't nothing.
Okay.
From my point of view.
Straight from Mexico say this, is that there is a particular racism against black people. Now the question I'm gonna ask you is, what did black people do to them to cause that?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
From my point of view. I think that it is something that has been passed along so much. I actually have somebody in my family who at one point was staying with us.
Hold on, get them likes up, man. How come we got 270 some people watching and only a few likes? So we got a lot of people hate watching. That's what it is. Anyway, we're going to get back to the content.
And I found
black people. Now the question I'm gonna ask you is, what did black people do to them to cause that?
absolutely nothing.
Okay.
From my point of view. I think that it is something that has been passed along so much. I actually have somebody in my family who at one point was staying with us, and I found a journal that had been written, talking about all these racial slurs and referring to my dad, in derogatory ways, and he would refer to himself as white. And I would say, you are Latino, who is a descendant, most realistically, you're probably a descendant of a mix of Native and Spanish ancestors, but you want to identify so badly as white and denigrate somebody who is Black. Why? Because that's what's been taught. That's what's been taught. So I think that after exposure, the next thing would be education. But like I said, a lot of people don't go out and try to educate themselves on that and try to even just reach out to their neighbor and say, all right, what does make me so different from you? And I feel like to me and you, that might be so basic. To me and you, that may be everyday life. To me and you, that might just be like common sense. But you realize really quickly that common sense is not so common.
As you heard Brenda, explain how Afro-Latinos in Mexico, how they just discriminated against, they're not treated right, even though they're small in population. They've been there for at least 500 years. We do know that. And then also, when she said that, they didn't do nothing to nobody to deserve that treatment. Just like us here in America, we didn't do nothing to any group to deserve the treatment that we receive from many groups. You can't name one thing that we have done as a collective of people, historically all the way up to today, that we could say, okay, yeah, we really did do some bad things to these people. But the interesting part is the one group of people who've done bad things to everybody is the main people that they want to kiss up to. As a matter of fact, something I didn't even know, because I'm not in no prison life or nothing like that. They were talking about in Southern California, in California prisons, do you know that those from Mexico and those in the Mexican gangs, do you know they click up with the Aryan Brotherhood, like the white supremacists? That's who they want to buddy up with. They never team up with black people against the white supremacists. They always click up with the white supremacists. And it shows a lot from what Brenda is saying about in Mexico.
A lot of Southern California Mexicans have denied that. No, we don't click up with the whites. Yes, you do. It's like, stop lying, man. You think we don't know about the anti-blackness in Mexico? We know the Spanish conquistadors whitewash Mexicans, whitewash Latin America in general. We know this. Stop pretending like people don't know about the alliance with the Mexican mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood. Stop pretending like they think people are dumb, like we don't know this. And anytime you confront them with these facts, they say, no, it's not true.
They want to call themselves white, those who want to do that, of course, and have all these derogatory.
I've had plenty of Mexicans try to deny their loose alliance with the white supremacists, the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, they stayed denying everything. They lied about the Black Seminoles. They pretend like anti-black racism ain't going on. They pretend like they didn't hide black people from the census in Mexico. I mean, a lot of these people just live in denial. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts. I'm not making up nothing. Make sure that you guys bless that like button.
Because I'm not in no prison life or nothing like that. They were talking about in Southern California, in California prisons, do you know that those from Mexico and those in the Mexican gangs, do you know they click up with the Aryan Brotherhood, like the white supremacists? That's who they want to buddy up with. They never team up with black people against the white supremacists. They always click up with the white supremacists. And it shows a lot from what Brenda is saying about in Mexico. They want to call themselves white, those who want to do that, of course, and have all these derogatory names toward black people. See, this is the stuff that been needing to be discussed, because when people are coming across that border into the United States of America, they bring in that mess with them. And I said before, we don't need to be importing a problem. We got enough racists to deal with in this country. Enough. We don't need to be importing them. We don't. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There's only one political party in America that black people has this weird allegiance to, that believes in just flooding the gates open and letting people that have those attitudes come across the border. Think about that. Biden will have no problem with people like that coming across the border. He has no problem with Ukrainians coming over here. When we seen videos in Ukraine of how they was treating Africans. But yet he's cool with them coming in, but let the Haitians try to come in and nope, get yourself right back to Haiti. And Haiti is a war zone right now because of what the powers that be. We know it was the Western powers that end up helping get the president assassinated of Haiti. Ain't heard nothing about that no more, and the country has descended into chaos. I seen a video on CNN about what's going on. Poor people in Haiti. Poor people.
It was a Mexican in the comments talking about Mayate, so I had to bleep him. See, they can't deny anything that I'm saying. So they got to come with racial slurs or just flat out lie and say it's not true. Oh, it is true. You can fact check everything I've been talking about. Southern California Mexicans you guys do have a loose alliance with white supremacists. Mexico hid their black population out of the census. You barely added them to the Constitution. All facts. All facts. No lies detected here. It ain't my fault that it's not my fault that you guys are allergic to the facts. So you can keep on trolling and stay in denial. I'm gonna keep hitting you upside the head with these irrefutable facts. Now deal with that.
That believes in just flooding the gates open and letting people that have those attitudes come across the border. Think about that. Biden will have no problem with people like that coming across the border. He has no problem with Ukrainians coming over here. When we seen videos in Ukraine of how they was treating Africans. But yet he's cool with them coming in, but let the Haitians try to come in and nope, get yourself right back to Haiti. And Haiti is a war zone right now because of what the powers that be. We know it was the Western powers that end up helping get the president assassinated of Haiti. Ain't heard nothing about that no more, and the country has descended into chaos. I seen a video on CNN about what's going on. Poor people in Haiti. Poor people. I don't blame them for trying to leave. After seeing that video, I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. You can't really fight against all the weapons that the gangs over there have. Now, Haiti does not even make weapons. So where they getting the weapons from? We know they get them from the West. We know this, to continue the chaos in black nations. But the Democrat Party underneath Biden has no problem with those people coming over here. And you wonder why it's more and more becoming a problem that you're seeing as their numbers rise up. You coming in with anti-black racism and attitudes. And this is why I'm focused on this particular topic. It's been coming up more and more, but we've been discussing this topic for a few years now. This is not a new interview that I conducted. This was 3 years ago, and I have, another interview I did with Brenda a year prior. And my thing is this.
I've been exposing this for a long time, right? And people's always crying. No, I'm just talking about the history that a lot of these people love to deny. Anti-blackness is embedded in Mexico's culture and Latin American culture, right? And they bring that mentality with them over here across the border. It's just a known fact. I've been doing this for too long. See, people hate when I bring the facts, so they say, oh, I'm spreading hate, or no, I'm not spreading hate. I'm shedding light on history that you guys tried to bury. I'm shedding light on history that you guys tried to bury.
Black people all over the world should be speaking up and defending themselves and showing what's going on, because our attitudes, and this is why I'm focused on this particular topic. It's been coming up more and more, but we've been discussing this topic for a few years now. This is not a new interview that I conducted. This was 3 years ago, and I have, another interview I did with Brenda a year prior. And my thing is this. Black people all over the world should be speaking up and defending themselves and showing what's going on. Because our brothers and sisters in Latin America, even though there's more of them in Latin America than we have us here in America, they need to start speaking up, saying something about it. And if you are not Afro-Latino, but you live in Latin America, you say, hey, wait a minute, that's wrong. That's wrong attitudes. You should speak up as well. Because everybody needs to call that mess out. The way the world is working right now, we are in a globalized.
Anti-blackness is normal in Mexico and Latin America. Even the black people who's been there, they've been quiet for so long. but they seen how revolutionary foundational Black Americans are and how we get things accomplished over here. So a lot of Afro Latinos all across Latin America, oh, they've been speaking out lately about the anti-Black racism. You go to any one of these Latin American countries, you don't see Black people in the media, you don't see them in politics. You barely see them when they take the cameras to those countries. It's like they hide those people. Well, it ain't like they do. They hide those people. That's why most people never even heard of Afro Mexicans, never knew about their existence. The majority of people. I had Mexicans tell me there's no such thing as an Afro Mexican because a lot of them either didn't know or they were just in denial. Either way, it shows how deep racism runs in Mexico.
System now. The world should be speaking up and defending themselves and showing what's going on. Because our brothers and sisters in Latin America, even though there's more of them in Latin America than we have us here in America, they need to start speaking up, saying something about it. And if you are not Afro-Latino, but you live in Latin America, you say, hey, wait a minute, that's wrong. That's wrong attitudes. You should speak up as well. Because everybody needs to call that mess out. The way the world is working right now, we are in a globalized system now. You can't just get to your own little group now and just, I'm going to stay on this side. I ain't fooling with nobody. That's not the way the world works now. Everybody's dealing with everybody. Look at the situation with the virus that happened, right? It happened over there in China, but it ended up touching you over here in America. It touched you in Latin America. It touched you in the Caribbean. It touched you in Europe. It touched you in Asia. It touched you in the continent of Africa. Meaning we live in a globalized system now. People's issues don't just stay in their country no more. So I'm a firm believer of we need to.
Yeah, so let's go to the next clip. Listen, man, I put so many people up on game. It's a lot of people who's
often have this
sense that you probably
a lot of people have hit me up in my in my Gmail like, thanks, Red, because I never knew about this. Some of you guys did, but a lot of people didn't know about the existence of Afro Mexicans and how the Black Seminoles fled to Mexico and how they helped Mexico to defend their borders. So they didn't go over there to become freeloaders. They helped Mexico to defend their border against the United States. That is a known fact. Make sure that you bless that like button. It ain't nothing.
To respond to or maybe respond to some misconceptions?
To be honest, I didn't really spend a lot of time going through the comments on from your site, and but I did get a lot of messages. I had a lot of people contacting me on.
Haven't you guys noticed that Mexicans love saying this ain't true? There's no racism in Mexico when you barely added the Black population to the census. When you call them out for being loose allies with the Aryan Brotherhood in California prison, the Southern California Mexicans, a lot of them will deny it and say, no, it's not true. Anytime you present a fact to them, the first thing they're going to say is, it's not true. Even when you listen, what's crazy is this, even when you bring the receipts, they're still going to say, no, it's not true. It's like these people were taught to deny racism from their country. Anytime there's a Black accomplishment, anytime we achieve something, they go out of their way to say that's not true. Or somebody like Sonny said, well, you guys did the first open heart surgery, but a white man helped you. You don't want to give credit to the people who helped you. Well, you guys did create hip hop, but Latinos helped you. These people got a twisted mindset. They go out of their way. These people go out of their way so that they ain't got to give Black people their props. Oh, no, it's not true. Do you know that a Black man abolished slavery in Mexico? No, that's not true. Do you know that Gaspar Yanga defeated the Spanish in several battles in Mexico to help Mexico gain their independence from Spain? No, that's not true. Do you know that Mexico barely added Blacks to the census in 2019? Blacks in Mexico wasn't even a part of the Mexican Constitution, although they've been there for centuries. No, that's not true. Just in denial, man.
Media and wanting to continue the conversation afterwards. So that was something that I loved. Something that did come up that was a little bit, I think, jarring but understandable is the concept of, well, what does it mean to be black?
Well, this is why I said Southern California Mexicans. I got a cat in the comments saying Northern California Mexicans align with blacks, which is true. Southern California Mexicans align themselves with the Aryan brothers, white supremacists. This is a known fact. I gave you several receipts.
A lot of people were saying, well, it's all nice and everything that you're saying it sounds good, but does that really mean that Afro-Latinos are black? And I understand that a lot of people don't necessarily seem to believe that, especially, people coming into my DMs and trying to have a respectful conversation about it, but disagreeing. But that's what I think is interesting about the African diaspora in general. I feel like in the United States, we often have this conception of the African diaspora starting and ending in the United States when that's not the case.
Like I said, they sent more African slaves to Latin America than they did to the United States. The overwhelming majority of African slaves went to Latin America. Mexicans don't even know that. Like, it's crazy that they don't know this, but then again, when you're brainwashed by Spanish conquistadors, what do you really expect them to know? Their version of history comes from the white man, the conquistador, the colonizer, right? Most Latinos, not even just Mexicans, the overwhelming majority of them never knew that the majority of slaves went to Latin. The overwhelming majority of the African slaves got dropped off in Latin America. Only 3 to 5% got brought to the United States. 90% of Latinos don't even know that. And when you educate them with these facts, the first thing they say is, no, that's not true. That's their favorite word. No, that's not true.
Right. So they wanted for you to define what blackness is to you, or they just want to say that, well, you're not black. What is it they were homing in on?
The majority of the comments that were disagreeing with what I had to say were just saying, well, I don't think you're black. I don't think that you really qualify. And then I had half the people were saying, thank you for representing black people in this way. Thank you for representing Afro-Latinos in this way. Thank you for starting this conversation. So I think it's a little bit of both. And I feel like growing up in the South, it's something that has always been a little bit of a circumstantial thing. When I went to school and nobody knew I spoke Spanish, it wasn't really a question. But then when people would come home and meet my parents and they would say, wait, your dad has an accent. Where is that accent from? So my dad was raised in Panama, but he has a Jamaican grandmother. So he kind of has a little bit of a
This is why I say knowledge that you can't get in college, because colleges are not going to teach you the truth about black history. They give you this watered down version of black history in college, right? So why do we expect Mexicans to know the truth when they've been brainwashed by Spanish conquistadors? They've been taught to deny blackness. They've been taught to deny anti-black racism in their country. They were taught to deny anything. When it's time to give black people credit for something that we created, they say, no, it's not true. Or they're going to say the white man helped you. Or they're going to say, yes, you guys created hip hop, but we helped you. So these people go out of their way so that they ain't got to give us props. But we don't need them to give us props. Why? Because history is on our side. The facts about history is on our side. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts. Mexico went out of their way to hide their black history. This is why they hid black people from the census for centuries. Prior to the Spanish conquistadors showing up, Mexico didn't have this racism issue. Latin America didn't have this racism issue until the Spanish conquistadors showed up and whitewashed everybody in Latin America. Once the Spanish conquistadors colonized and conquered Latin America, that's where these Latin countries developed this anti-black mindset. They got brainwashed. They got colonized. They got taken over. So eventually they took on the white man's mindset. They look at black people in the same lens that the white people do. This is why I was calling a lot of these people in my comments. I said, look at all these conquistadors in my comments, these wannabe Spanish conquistadors in my comments, because if you went to Spain, people in Spain ain't going to accept you for being Spanish. So that's why I call them wannabe Spanish conquistadors with an anti-black mindset.
Be an accent. People are like, wait, so he has this weird kind of Spanish, kind of Caribbean, kind of, what is that? Does that really mean he's black? Then he's not black. So that's one of the first times that I really started realizing that there was a little bit of confusion, number one, and number two, there was this doubt that people had upon.
I said the black Seminoles are descendants of FBA. You know what this Mexican said? No, no, that's not true. I said, bro, the black Seminoles are descendants of FBA. These are runaway slaves who mixed with the Seminoles and they created their own tribe called the Black Seminoles. And the Black Seminoles eventually fled to Mexico and helped Mexico to defend their borders against the United States. You know what this Mexican told me? No, no, Red, that's not true. The black Seminoles are not descendants of FBA. That's not true. I said, oh my God.
My identity, which then made me doubt my identity back when I was in middle school. You know, that was the first time that I remember going through that.
Right. I mean, there are, some differences, yes, because we was, in different areas. So, for instance, when you mention, you say everything in the United States, we're kind of branded as the, representation of what blacks are. Even not even on the continent, they aren't the representatives. You say black people, African American people come up, you talk about all the celebrities and the guys who've done things in sports or innovation, etc. And some of our identity, unfortunately, was told to us by, the colonizer, right? And because some of it is told through that lens, you have some people, and some, it's not that many, but some in our community that will reject anything outside of, African American, right? But we are very vast, and that's why I like to study the transatlantic slave trade and find out everywhere we ever dropped off, right? So if you could, do you identify, just for those people, ask the question, you
Yes.
identify as a black woman?
Absolutely. I always have.
Okay.
I always have. And it wasn't until other people started telling me, well, I don't really think that you fit into that I started asking myself, wait, then where does my identity lie? But I think that was, obviously when you're coming up, you have
They didn't hijack. They called themselves the Black Seminoles. At first, they were just the Seminoles, but when black people and the Seminoles came together, because think about it, the Seminoles in Florida were runaways too, because a lot of natives were enslaved by the slave masters in English colonies, right? The British colonies, right? Now, Florida was ruled by Spain in the 1700s and the early 1800s. So a lot of natives fled to Florida. And when they went to Florida, Spain said, we'll protect you as long as you help us to go against the British. So a lot of the Seminoles, and not just Seminoles, you had the Creeks, the Cherokees, a lot of tribes escaped to Florida because they wanted to get away from the British colony, because Florida became a part of the United States later. I believe the United States purchased Florida from Spain in 1821. But when Florida was under Spain's rule, a lot of natives fled there for refuge. A lot of foundational black Americans in Georgia and South Carolina, they fled to Florida. So when they fled to Florida, the black runaway slaves and the native runaway slaves, they clicked up together and they created a whole new tribe, and they called it the Black Seminoles. So they blended the Seminoles and black. So they became the Black Seminoles. They had babies, some of them married. They created their own society and civilization, and they fought back against, you know what I mean, the British, who kept trying to invade Florida. But eventually Spain caved in and sold Florida to the British. And that's when there were, if you look up the Black Seminole Wars, that's when a lot of those Seminole Wars were taking place, because the Black Seminoles at one particular time refused to leave Florida. So they was fighting to stay on their land. They didn't want to leave. Now, eventually they came to an agreement. Some of them went to Oklahoma, and some of them fled to Mexico, because Mexico said, well, hey, if you help us defend our borders, you guys can come down here, because at that particular time, Mexico had abolished slavery. Vincent Guerrero, which was the second president of Mexico, nicknamed El Negro, he abolished slavery. So a lot of the Black Seminoles knew if they made it to Mexico, they would be free, because a black man abolished slavery down there. So this was the deal. They told the Black Seminoles, you come to Mexico, we won't let the white man come down here and capture you, but you got to help us to defend our borders against Mexico, against the United States. Right? So I'm just giving you history, some historical facts.
situations that are going to make you question who you are as a person, not just in terms of race, but, you know, just growing up and trying to come into your own. But that was the first time that I felt the need to become educated on my history. And I felt the need to become educated on the people that came before me so that I could kind of explain to myself, okay, this is my path. This is how I got here.
Right. And when you look at, you know, and I've been looking into this a lot more with the Afro Latinos, whether they're in Mexico, Central America, South America. I just done a story the other day about Portugal, and black people are treated the exact same way everywhere. You know, it's not like we get a pass somewhere. So when it comes to Afro Latinos, I was listening to this documentary speaking about the caste system that the Spaniards and Portuguese instituted in their society. So, and then you touched on this before, maybe you can expound on this. You have someone that look like me and say, oh, I'm not
No,
black.
a lot of people didn't know that a lot of, like I said, a lot of natives fled to Florida, and Spain gave them protection from the English. So not only did you have foundational black Americans escaping slave plantations from like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, they all fled to Florida because Spain said, you come down here and you help us, you could be free as long as you help to defend the state against the white man. And they agreed to that. So they went down there. So the blacks and the natives, and it wasn't just Seminoles, because think about it like this. Study the word Seminole. Study what the word Seminole mean. The Seminole tribe was Creeks, Choctaw, Cherokees, just different native tribes. All the runaway slaves, all the runaway natives fled to Florida. So you had Native Americans from different tribes who went to Florida to seek refuge with the Spanish. So they created the Seminoles because it was just a mix of natives, and then the blacks mixed with them. They became the Black Seminoles. That's just some history right there, man. A lot of people don't really know about that because they wasn't taught true history. They was taught the white man's story. But hey, man, this history is coming out, man. A lot of people are up on game about this now. A lot of people didn't know about this 15, 20 years ago, even 5, 10 years ago. But a lot of people are starting to recognize this now because, you got people like me, Phil Scott, and a long list of others who are putting out this information, giving you the irrefutable facts, some historical facts. Now, I need you guys to bless the like button, support the Cash App, bless the like button for these jewels, for this real history. Shout out to this beautiful Afro Latina for being honest about the anti-black racism that goes on in Mexico.
Educated on my history, and I felt the need to become educated on the people that came before me so that I could kind of explain to myself, okay, this is my path. This is how I got here.
Right. And when you look at, and I've been looking into this a lot more with the Afro Latinos, whether they're in Mexico, Central America, South America. I just done a story the other day about Portugal, and black people are treated the exact same way everywhere. You know, it's not like we get a pass somewhere. So when it comes to Afro Latinos, I was listening to this documentary speaking about the caste system that the Spaniards and Portuguese instituted in their society. So, and then you touched on this before, maybe you can expound on this. You have someone that look like me and say, oh, I'm not black, I'm Dominican, or I'm not black, like, what is the issue? Like, why would they refuse to accept black?
Well, I think that the first thing is that a lot of times in Latino society, there has been this rejection of Black culture. You talked about Dominican. Why is it that sharing the island of Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic and Haiti has such a huge divide, where there has even been a point in time where it is my understanding that Haitians or people who were born on the Dominican side of the island who were of Haitian descent were told, you know what, you don't have Dominican citizenship. You need to return to Haiti, even though, you might have grown up there, you might have been born there, but there's this hatred towards that identity. I think it's very common for Latinos to identify, for example, as costeños, which means coastal people, or morenos, which is referring to a dark brown skin tone, anything before they identify as a Black person. But I think that with social media, a lot of that is changing because we have the access to be able to get online and realize how a lot of our traditional dances are pretty much if not directly derivative, or at least have some type of similarities to a lot of local dances in different parts of Africa. And you start to realize, wait, this language or this dialect sounds a lot like this other one from this part of Africa, or the food, or the
Yeah, a lot of food and a lot of dance and a lot of culture in Latin America came from Africa and black aboriginals. This is a known fact. You know, this is just more history that they've been this is history that they've been hiding for decades, really centuries. But let's get back to the content though. If you're watching this content, make sure that you bless the like button, show some love and support for the show. King Supreme is dropping them jewels that you can use on a daily basis. Let's get back to it.
directly derivative, or at least have some type of similarities to a lot of local dances in different parts of Africa. And you start to realize, wait, this language or this dialect sounds a lot like this other one from this part of Africa, or the food, or the, the customs. And you start to realize that a lot of our blackness as Afro-Latinos is rooted in Africanism. We just, as an Afro-Latino society, have not always acknowledged that.
So what would it take for them to look in the mirror and say, wait a minute, I'm a black person, I'm an African person? Because I was watching how some of them try to say, oh, well, I have this kind of hair, so I'm not like you. And someone that has maybe what they call 4C hair say, oh, well, you're really black. You got that kinky hair. You know, like, what is it going to take? Because in this system of global white supremacy, we all treated the same.
Well, that's the thing, is breaking that down. I think that that's the number one thing, is breaking that down. And in Mexico, for example, I think last I saw, the last statistics that I saw, it was about 1% black. So it's not something that people see all the time, whereas somewhere in the Dominican Republic, blackness is all around you. So I think that number one, it depends on the country, because realistically, every single country from Mexico to the Dominican Republic to Brazil, the Afro-Latino communities are completely different. In Mexico, for example, they're physically marginalized. They are located around coastal areas and primarily around the edges of the country, whereas in other parts, they're just all over the place. So I think that understanding that it's going to be different, it's going to be a different process for each group and each country. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, just like here in the United States, or in the UK, or all these places where we have these movements of people standing up and saying, you know what, I'm not really down to let revisionist history tell me about myself anymore. And actually, I'm in the process of starting to look into going back to grad school. And what I want to do, I would love to go back to Clark and study. I studied at a PWI. And yeah, I studied Black Studies, but I studied Black Studies at a PWI. I want to go back to Clark and study at an HBCU and see what exactly it is that I can learn about myself and about my history from people who look like me.
Right. So if you mentioned that the brothers and sisters in Mexico are marginalized and they're treated bad, and we, like I said, everywhere we're at in the world, someone having an issue with us. But here in America, we have stood up to a lot, and we still standing
100%.
up now. We know, like I said, I guess we just that warrior tribe. We ain't no punks here. Much as they try to beat us down. But why is it that we haven't seen a mass movement of the Afro-Latinos standing up and saying, hey, we're not going to take this crap?
Well, like I said, I can only speak to my experiences. And so having grown up in Mexico, I grew up back and forth between Mexico City and South Georgia. I can talk about my experiences there. And I know that in a lot of parts of Mexico, for example, Oaxaca is one of the places where most Afro-Latinos are very heavily marginalized. And those are communities that are often, coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds. They may not always have access to electricity all of the time. They may not always have access to cell phone service and internet all of the time. It's not like it's not there, but it's just not as easily accessible as it would be, in other communities. So I think that the division between Afro-Latino communities themselves, just spatially, is one of the main things. But the fact that they tend to kind of stick to themselves and almost live, isolated from the rest of the general society. Now, for the people who are living day to day in Mexico City or places like that, I think the fact that most people in Mexico, for example, when I walk around with my dad, I remember he would always tell me stories about how the little kids would just always come up and touch his hair because they'd never seen anybody like him. And even today, when you have, so many prominent Black musicians and rappers and actors and whatever, people still look at him and they're like, wait, can I touch your hair? Because, I've never seen things like that. I've never seen somebody like that in person. Or, for example, I actually made a friend the other day, and she said, you know what? I've never really actually met a Black person. Like, can I ask you some things? Like, will you be offended if I ask you certain questions? And I said, you know what? Ask me anything. Because I think that exposure is going to be the first step to bridging that gap.
So in the 21st century, you basically what you're saying is there are people that cut off where they're asking you questions about.
Hit the like button and shout out to this woman for telling the truth. Because a lot of people refuse to talk about it, or they're just ignorant when it comes to the history.
Black people.
100%. 100%. I actually just got done working in Miami for the last 6 months. Miami. We're not talking the middle of nowhere. We're talking Miami. I met a girl who, just flat out had to ask me all of these questions about Black people, and she was so afraid of offending me. But I said, you know what? I think it's bizarre to me that you've never met a Black person living in a big city in Mexico. We're both working in Miami, where she's from a big city in Mexico, as am I. And you've never met somebody that looks that different to you. So I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that there is a lack of education, and that's not an excuse, but I think it is an explanation, because sometimes we can't educate ourselves unless we know what to educate ourselves on.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the Afro Latinos in Mexico being marginalized. I mean, could you expound on that? Like, they're prevented with essential services. Like, what they're actually doing to them to marginalize them?
What I mean is, like, the physical marginalization. I mean that literally Afro-Latino communities are found on the periphery of the country. So it's not always super common to find, for example, communities of Afro-Latinos or large communities of Afro-Latinos living in the heart of Mexico City or in the heart of Guadalajara or whatever it may be. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but I'm saying that you have to remember, Mexico is about 1% Afro-Latino, 1% Black. So the majority of that 1% is located around the coast.
What is even though they're low in population, but I've heard other people like this straight from Mexico say this, is that there is a particular racism against Black people. Now the question I'm gonna ask you is, what did Black people do to them to cause that?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
From my point of view. I think that it is something that has been passed along so much. I actually have somebody in my family who at one point was staying with us, and I found a journal that had been written, talking about all these racial slurs and referring to my dad, in derogatory ways, and he would refer to himself as white. And I would say, you are Latino, who is a descendant, most realistically, you're probably a descendant of a mix of Native and Spanish ancestors, but you want to identify so badly as white and denigrate somebody who is Black. Why? Because that's what's been taught. That's what's been taught. So I think that after exposure, the next thing would be education. But like I said, a lot of people don't go out and try to educate themselves on that and try to even just reach out to their neighbor and say, all right, what does make me so different from you? And I feel like to me and you, that might be so basic. To me and you, that may be everyday life. Me and you, that might
see. What's crazy is, even when you get people who are from these particular places to speak out on the anti-Blackness that goes on there, they're still in denial. You can bring 100 people up to speak on their experiences, Afro-Mexicans from Mexico. The pale-skinned people will still say, no, it's not true. Oh, no, it's true. We're bringing receipts. Not only are we talking about Constitution, laws, people speaking from personal experiences, all the way down to the laws that were put in place to keep blacks in Mexico disenfranchised. You can bring all of these receipts, or you can bring all these receipts. They're still going to say, no, it's not true.
Just be like common sense, but you realize really quickly that common sense is not so common.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's a common problem here in the United States. And I hear this a lot, and even my wife has discussed this with me. Where does it come from? Why, people who identify themselves as Latino, they can have dark hair, they can even be your color, but they want to call themselves white, because at the end of the day, white folks, the ones that don't care for them too much, they want to build a wall to keep them out. So yet they want to identify and say they're white. Why? And what kind of prize they're going to get by doing that?
Well, speaking from my own experiences, in Mexico, for example, you can walk around and find jobs that very blatantly discriminate based on age. You can find jobs that will blatantly discriminate based on race. And even if it's just working at a store or working at a laundromat, you'll see the signs handwritten, but they'll say, we don't want XYZ type of person. And that's something that is not just in politics, that's not just in movies, and that's not just in the mass media, that's everyday life. I remember walking in where my apartment is located. I remember walking across the street to a laundromat and, asking if, they were looking for, if they had any part-time work. And they said, yeah, we do. Here's the sign. And the first thing was age. They said, well, we won't hire anybody younger than 40. Sometimes it's we won't hire anybody older than 40. Sometimes it's we want white passing Mexicans. And it's not like here where you can just, if that happened, it would be an immediate lawsuit. If that happened here, it would be all over social media and it would be a controversy and the company would probably be forced to apologize, because here it's something that's so under the table, or not maybe so under the table, but it's something that just isn't said. It happens, but it isn't blatantly said to your face. Whereas in Mexico, it can be.
Right, and what you just stated, you know why you have lawsuits in America to do that? Because Black Americans put in the work, the blood, sweat, and tears to fight against discrimination practices in hiring. Okay.
Absolutely.
So our issue as Black Americans, in which more Black Americans are getting on this now, is that when people come in, and you can think about this, Black Americans is the ones that fought for other non-white groups to come into this country as well. Because at one point in time, this country would not allow no one in here but white folks, period. If you're not from Europe, then you're not coming in. So since that advantage is used very well, the affirmative action, whatever else, why is it that when some people may come over, not all, but some come over, and they want to look down on Black Americans when you wouldn't have the opportunity to come in here if it wouldn't been for Black Americans?
I would say that a lot of that is rooted in this Eurocentric society, and it's everything from beauty standards to, the most basic things are rooted in that Eurocentric mentality, right? So, yeah, you can talk about it from that point of view, but I think about it from the point of view of little girls. Why is it that so many little girls feel? I get the messages I get most frequently is usually,
you got to appreciate her honesty, man, because a lot of them are not going to be honest. So when you find somebody who is honest, round of applause, man. Her mother is Mexican and her daddy's an Afro Panamanian. So she's witnessed this firsthand. She's speaking from firsthand experiences. No, but it's still not true.
From moms who say, hey, I'm having issues with my daughter. She's getting picked at school. She hates how she looks. I don't know what to tell her. Can you help me talk to her? That's the most common message that I get on my social media. So why is it that from a very young, from the time that you're, elementary school age, or even younger, you already have this Eurocentric standard. And that's something that's pervasive throughout our entire society, not just in beauty, not just in hiring practices, not just in politics. It's something that transcends every aspect.
Listen, you got Spanish conquistadors in the comments denying. There's no way that you can deny anything. We showed you the Mexican Constitution. They barely added blacks to the census. A black man abolished slavery. Mexicans was whitewashed by the Spanish conquistadors. All of this is documented. These are irrefutable facts. But you still got Spanish conquistadors all in the comment section trolling, saying, no, it's not true. Just ridiculous. These people are so ridiculous, it's not even worth having a conversation with them. You can show them all the evidence, all the facts. They're still going to run their mouth. No, that's not true.
Our society.
So let me ask you a question. I don't know if you paid attention to this because I've seen it. Literally, you mentioned the Eurocentric beauty standard, but you do realize that that standard is just about dead now, and now like the beauty standard is more so how black women look, or even women that's in Latin countries, that's derived from Africans. You do realize like more. I don't know if you've seen the pictures that came out with the black fishing. Did you see that?
100%, yeah.
Okay, and they're not trying to look like themselves at all. They're trying to get injections to get your color and everything else. So what are they going to do due to this new beauty standard that's out, and being more and more accepted? Because the Kim Kardashians of the world, etc. They're not trying to look like a traditional white woman.
But I would actually argue a small part of what you just said.
Okay.
I think that as a whole, I agree with what you're saying. The beauty standard is changing, but I would not say that Eurocentric beauty standard is dead, because you look at somebody like Kim Kardashian, you look at the Kylie Jenners of the world, and you're going to have people praising their body type. You're going to have people saying how cool, how fashionable. But you have somebody like Nicki Minaj or Cardi B wear the exact same thing, or do the exact same thing, or pose the exact same provocative way, and they're going to say, oh, well, that's trashy. That's ghetto. Why? It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact hairstyle, the same exact clothes, the same exact pose, but it's perceived completely differently from my point of view.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but let's talk about those women you just mentioned. They got their lips injected to match black women.
Absolutely.
They got butt jobs. They got all these things, because you remember Kylie. Nobody was checking for Kylie.
100%.
That. Until she got all that work done. Now, I'm going to say that's a racial thing propped up by white supremacy, because, yes, they'll say, oh, braids on a black woman is ugly, but when Kylie do it, oh, it's so daring. You get what I'm saying? They trying to maintain that, but still at the end of the day, they're copying. So,
well, they are copying. People copy things from black people and make it beautiful. See, there was in the early days, people thought big butts was ugly. People use black women as the standard of booty. Now everybody want a booty. See what I'm saying? So they demonize what we do. Then eventually everybody latches on to it, and then it becomes acceptable for mainstream society. But when black people are doing it, they try their best to demonize it. They made it seem like a woman with a big butt was a terrible thing, even though a lot of men lusted for women with big butts behind the scenes, just like the white slave master used to lust for black women with big butts. But publicly, he shamed it. Behind the scenes, he loved it.
I was trying to understand how to break down this ideology that is in certain Afro countries where our people are at. You get what I'm saying? Because I don't agree with even, I think Amara La Negra talked about that. Like, oh, you don't want to get married to nobody black because you're going to mess up the bloodline. And this bloodline conversation that comes up too. I mean, is they want to be white so bad that that's what it is, or what?
To the bloodline situation, I couldn't completely speak on that. But in terms of where do we draw the line, I almost feel like for a lot of people, a lot of problematic people, the line stops at actually being black. So you see these women on social media, and yeah, they borrow. Yeah, it goes back to, even things like colorism. Somebody like me is going to get a much different reaction than somebody who has like your complexion, for example. And that's not okay. But I think that a lot of that goes back to these white women or non-black women or women who are just not women of color can borrow the hairstyles, the trends, the outfits, everything. but the line stops at being black. You know, like, did we not forget um, how Cardi B was perceived when she came out? You know, of course, she had a lot of different things coming on, but I don't know. I just feel like people can be perceived a lot differently once they're on the other side of that line.
Yeah, I agree with you about colorism because they say
Yeah, man. So people say, "Oh, this is Mex." No, this is anti-blackness. I'm speaking on global anti-blackness, mainly the anti-blackness that's coming from Mexico and Latin America, because this right here is hidden history. So I'm bringing it to the forefront so that everybody understands why a lot of Mexicans had this anti-black mindset. Mexicans were whitewashed by the Spanish conquistadors. Prior to the Spanish conquistadors colonizing Mexico, nobody thought like that. Nobody had an anti-black mindset, right? So I'm just exposing the anti-blackness that comes from their culture. So when you think about Southern California Mexicans and their alliance with white supremacists in California prisons, it makes perfect sense when you think about how they've been whitewashed by the Spanish conquistadors, taught to love white and taught to hate everything black. Mexicans actually fought to be legally white in the 1930s here in America. So if you make the connections from the anti-blackness in Mexico to the anti-blackness that's in the United States, you will see, whoa, red is really exposing a lot of this true history. Yes. Make sure that you bless the like button. We got 588 people watching. 588 people watching. Come on, hit that like button, man. We need 500 plus likes for this beautiful game early this morning. Yeah.
Cardi B was my color, like you said. They wouldn't receive her as they do, and she couldn't get away with all of the things that she get away with. I agree with you 100%. Colorism is definitely a real issue all over the place, but it's just a symptom of racism and white supremacy. So,
Yeah.
Brenda,
Yes.
what you have next on the line for maybe some speaking engagements or what people could possibly check out with you?
Yeah. So I am actually going to be touring this year, doing a bunch of speaking engagements, and I will be announcing most likely this week that I have started working with a speakers agency to help fulfill that. But most importantly for me, this is something that I just kind of have decided, and I'm not sure if it'll be for this year or it'll be for the future. But I definitely want to go back to school. I definitely want to go back to school. And I studied Black Studies in college, like I told you, but I'm very interested in studying more about Africana women's issues and becoming more educated on that. I also don't want to just look at it from, like you said, a U.S. point of view. I want to look at it from a more global point of view and see what work I can do that can help me connect back to my roots in Africa. My family has been trying to trace back our family tree for I don't even know, about 10 years now, and we still have not been able to figure out where exactly in Africa our family stems from. So that's something that I think is really important and meaningful to me. And I work.
You gotta love her. She's a beautiful Afro Latina. She acknowledges her black roots, and this is the type of woman that you would love to have. She's beautiful. She's knowledgeable, and yes, this is what it is. I do this to shed light on history. We got 600 people watching. Get us 600 likes, man. It's only right. If you enjoy the content and you want me to produce more content like this, bless the like button, and I'll continue to give you guys this. I'll continue to drop these hot topics, pertaining to anti-black racism. See, now you understand why a lot of Mexicans feel the way that they feel about black people. The Spaniards introduced that caste system to them, and they taught them that white was good and black is wrong. This is why they fought to be legally white in the 1930s here in the United States of America. White is right and black is bad. So anybody with common sense knows that Mexicans was whitewashed by the Spaniards. Latinos all across Latin America were whitewashed by the Spaniards. This is just the unfortunate reality. I'm giving you the facts about history, the unfortunate reality.
Abroad, but I think it's time for me to reconnect with the African continent.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We should be trying to connect, and that's something that I definitely
listen. I'm giving you the facts about history, man. Afro, they lied about history and they told their story. We all know that Mexicans were whitewashed by Spanish conquistadors. Latinos all across Latin America were indoctrinated and brainwashed by Spanish conquistadors. They were whitewashed by these people. So this is why Mexicans in the 1930s in the United States fought to be legally white. So they took that same anti-black mindset from Mexico and brought it to the United States. This is why Mexicans in the 1930s fought for white proximity. They fought for white acceptance. These are historical facts. I'm not making this up. I haven't said one thing racist about Mexicans. I'm just giving you the facts about history. I haven't said one thing racist about Mexicans. I'm just giving you the facts about history. That's all I'm doing. And you can fact check everything I said. So blacks barely being added to the census in Mexico, 2019. Mexicans in the United States of America fought to be legally white in the 1930s. They fought for white acceptance. And this is just the unfortunate reality. It comes from being whitewashed by the Spanish conquistadors. See, when Mexicans call themselves speaking up for civil rights, they were fighting for white proximity. They didn't fight for the civil rights of people of color. Mexicans fought for white acceptance. They fought to be legally white. You can study the history yourself, and I'm not lying. I'm not making this up. So now you understand why there's so many black and brown problems. Mexicans were whitewashed by the Spanish conquistadors who have issues with blacks. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts, man. I haven't said one thing that was racist. All I did was give you the facts about history, the unfortunate reality about history, all across Latin America.
Believe in. I think, maybe I'm just off the cuff with this, but you probably will be on the tour later on this year, correct? If everything, finalizes, correct?
We're still in talks, yeah, but
Okay.
hopefully that'll come to fruition as well.
Okay, yeah. Everyone's still in talks. Guys, we are trying to do a 6-city tour possibly. So we'll let you guys know about that. We're not talking in code. We just talking out loud about a few things. But I'll get you guys, some information on that. How can they get in contact with you on social media, just in case there's a question they have for you that I did not ask?
Absolutely. You can reach me on my social media at Bren Smith Lazama, and you want to stick that in the description box. I'm most active on Instagram, so that's probably the best way to reach me. And I'm always open to continuing conversation. I think that one of the most important things that anybody can say is I don't know. So I'm always open to learning more, to continuing conversations, and I hope you guys join me over there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you check out the social media.
I played this several times, and I'm gonna show you again how the LULAC organization wanted Mexicans to be recognized as white. I showed it several times, and I'm gonna show you again. Check it out.
The black people are deliberately trying to.
Now check this out. These are the LULAC organization, League of United Latino American Citizens. I believe that's the acronym. But I'm gonna show you what the LULAC leaders fought for, right? And then we're gonna move on to something else. I'm just giving you the facts about history. I'm not making anything up. I'm not using racial slurs. You could fact check everything that I said in this podcast, and you're gonna be like, damn, Red was telling the truth. I have no reason to make these things up.
Disrespect them, and I'm not sure why they're the United States government. Correct. You can also deal with that conversation when it deals with the police, right? Correct. But I'm also going to bring up.
Well, you got a lot of people hate watching. You got a lot of people who hate watch what I do. So this is why I got to tell a lot of fools to hit the like button. They're entertained. Please believe they're entertained. But you got a lot of haters. You got a lot of hate watchers, and you got a lot of jealous fellas. So they watch the content. They're entertained, but they don't want to hit the like button. I think we know why. But guess what? You can't stop the rain. You can't stop the rain, homie. It's coming. It's gonna flood soon. You can't stop the rain. You can't stop the rain. You can't stop the rain. Oh, nah, baby, you can't stop it.
One thing as well. Dr. Hector Garcia was a physician, military veteran, and advocate for the rights of Mexican Americans. Quote, "We are not and have never been a civil rights organization personally. I hate the word." Hector Garcia, founder of the American GI Forum.
They not like us.
They not like us. They not like us.
By the early 1950s, the American GI Forum, while still denying that it was a civil rights organization, sought to end discrimination in Texas schools, in employment, and in the use of public spaces. The core strategy depended on educating Anglos that Americans of Spanish-speaking descent or Latin Americans were Caucasian, and that to identify them as anything but white, whether on birth certificates or traffic citations, was illegal. Making any distinction between Latin Americans and whites, he wrote, was a slur, an insult to all Latin Americans of Spanish descent.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
John James Herrera was an American attorney, activist, and leader in the Chicano movement. Quote, Latin Americans of Mexican descent belong to the Caucasian race and are therefore white. John J. Herrera, LULAC percent.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
John James Herrera was an American attorney, activist, and leader in the Chicano movement. Quote, Latin Americans of Mexican descent belong to the Caucasian race and are therefore white. John J. Herrera, LULAC President, 1952. John James Herrera joined the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, in 1933 and began practicing law in Houston, Texas in 1943. During World War II, he was involved in the movement to end employment discrimination against Mexican Americans in Houston shipyards. In 1948, he joined the legal team that brought the school discrimination case of Minerva Delgado against the Bastrop Independent School District to the Texas Supreme Court. The ruling declared educational segregation of Mexican American students illegal in Texas.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
Felix Tijerina, 1905 to 1965, was a Mexican-American restaurateur, activist, and a philanthropist in Houston, Texas. He served as the 25th president of the League of United Latin American Citizens. Quote, let the Negro fight his own battles. His problems are not mine. I don't want to ally with them. Felix Tijerina stated that his mission was to help Mexican Americans merge into the American mainstream as successfully as he had, and that early Mexican restaurants like Felix's were among the first institutions where urban Anglos and Hispanics rubbed elbows. Tijerina's Americanized version of Mexican cooking was what brought the races together, and it was a triumph of diplomacy. Walsh also added that Tijerina's style of cooking was not about bringing authentic Mexican flavors to Texas, it was about putting Anglos at ease with things Mexican.
They not like us.
And these are their civil rights leaders, right? So if you look at what their civil rights leaders fought for, they fought to be legally white. They fought for white acceptance. Their civil rights leaders wasn't saying you need to respect us as people of color and give us civil rights. They said, no, we're going to fight to be accepted as white. That's what they did. That's what they did. And I'm not making this up. I'm giving you the receipts. You see what their civil rights leaders fought for. I didn't make any of this stuff up.
They not like us.
Americanized version of Mexican cooking was what brought the races together, and it was a triumph of diplomacy. Walsh also added that Tijerina's style of cooking was not about bringing authentic Mexican flavors to Texas, it was about putting Anglos at ease with things Mexican.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
Gustavo Gus C. Garcia, July 27, 1915, June 3, 1964, was an American civil rights attorney. Garcia worked with fellow attorney Carlos Cadena in the landmark case Hernandez versus Texas, 1954, arguing before the United States Supreme Court for the end of a practice of systematic exclusion of Hispanics from jury service in Jackson County, Texas. Gustavo stated this, I know Negroes aren't getting their full share of democracy, but frankly, I'm prejudiced against Negroes, and I do not believe that they are entitled to everything that we get. Garcia served as legal advisor to the League of United Latin American Citizens from 1939 to the 1940s. He was elected to the San Antonio Independent School District Board of Education in April of 1948, but later resigned. He helped revise the LULAC Constitution to permit non-Mexican Americans to become members in 1949. In that year, he also served as a lawyer to the family of Felix Longoria and helped contract negotiations for the rights of workers in the United States Mexico Barcero program. On May 8, 1950, Garcia and George I. Sanchez appeared before the State Board of Education to seek desegregation enforcement.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
A lot of Hispanic and Latino parents will literally try to teach you at a young age to not be friends with black people, and it's disgusting. They show you racism, anti-blackness, like colorism at a young age. You could be a dark-skinned Latino, and yet you will get a lot of hate. Not only that, media will even show that too. Where literally they
Now, I just showed you what the LULAC organization fought for, and the LULAC are basically the civil rights leaders of Mexicans and Latinos, right? And you're still going to have some fool tell you, no, this is not true. We're showing you the quotes. We're showing you what these people said. We're showing you what they fought for. And they're still going to fix their mouth to say that it's not true. Listen, homie, these people hate the truth. The truth is kryptonite to these people. I'm airing out the dirty laundry, the history that they've been hiding for centuries. I'm airing out the dirty laundry and they don't like it. I'm just showing you the anti-black racism that comes from their country. I told you that Mexicans and Latinos been whitewashed by the Spaniards, bro. So this is why they feel this way. They've been whitewashed. They've been listen, most Latinos have been taught to go against anything black but embrace everything white. Why do you think so many Latinos mark white in the census? It proves everything that I've been saying. They go against everything black, but embrace everything white. This is why the LULAC organization fought for Mexicans to be legally white. They fought for white acceptance. They wanted to assimilate. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
show that white Latinos are literally rich, smart, educated, and they're always holy. But when it comes to black people, or
if y'all trolls want me to read y'all comments, y'all got to start blessing that super chat. You got to start blessing that super chat. If not, I'm not reading your comments at all. Your comments will be ignored. Bless the super chat. Stop trolling and stop being the freeloader. You know you love the content. You're getting educated. You're being entertained at the same time. You're getting educated and you're entertained at the same time.
Afro Latinos, they're ghetto, they're poor, uneducated, and they're criminals. And not only that, a lot of these celebrities believe this too. And also, they do blackface. And that's why a lot of people don't want to unite when it comes to the Hispanic and Latino community, because of the amount of fucking anti-blackness, the racism towards black people. And not only that, y'all forget that literally black people have influenced our community so much, from technology, from food, to even music. And some of y'all be dancing to those music that literally were influenced by black people.
What does civil rights mean to you? So given the work that you've done on the marker, the fact that you're part of Latina, and all the things that you've been a part of, what does civil rights mean to you?
Shout out to Nada for the super chat. Nada says, salute. I appreciate you. Shout out to everybody. Let's go to Gasparianga. I don't do this to spread hate. I do this to shed light on hidden history. I don't do this to spread hate. I do this to shed light on hidden history. Mexico is hiding a lot of their black history.
Mexico Unexplained, where we is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the
Now here's Gasparianga. You know, Gasparianga is not talked about in Mexico. And look at everything that he did.
only ones to the subjects we will examine. Here is your host, Robert Bitto.
Welcome, and muy bienvenidos to episode number 159 of Mexico Unexplained, where we examine the magic, the mysteries, and the miracles of Mexico. I'm your host, Robert Bitto. Sometime in the early 1560s, a galleon left the west coast of Africa, near the modern nation of Gabon, carrying a precious cargo of slaves bound for the New World. The final destination of this ship would be the colony of New Spain, and the cargo on board would be sold at the slave markets at Veracruz on the Gulf Coast. For a few decades after the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, native labor was used to work the mines and the plantations of the territories that would later become the country of Mexico. The Spanish king, Charles V, allowed African slaves to be imported into the New World as the native labor force diminished due to overwork and disease.
Shout out to African Native for the super chat. Yes, a lot of natives died from the diseases, but the black aboriginals and the Africans were able to withstand some of those diseases because they were bigger and stronger. So the same diseases that killed off a lot of the native people, the Africans were able to survive those diseases just based on their genetic makeup and their physical strength. So this is why Africans made for the best slaves because of their physical strength. So, you know, having an African slave was better than anything else because the Africans can endure the Africans were able to endure conditions that a lot of other groups wasn't able to endure. So this is why everybody fought to have African slaves, just based on the physical attributes and their physical strength. Let's move on. And on top of that, their knowledge when it comes to agriculture, their knowledge when it comes to farming, their knowledge when it comes to food, and a long list of other things.
Initially, African slaves were brought to Mexico from the Spanish colonies of the West Indies, but by the middle of the 1500s, ships sailed directly from Africa to New Spain. On that galleon previously mentioned, which left the area of Gabon in the early 1560s, was a young man named Yanga or Nyanga. According to popular history, this slave named Yanga hailed from the nobility of the West African Yangbara tribe and was a prince. Yanga's inner nobility struggled to break free as he toiled on the sugar plantation called Nuestra Señora de la Concepción in tropical Mexico. By 1570, he had had enough. Now known by his Christian name of Gaspar Yanga, the young and robust slave revolted against his masters. Encouraging fellow slaves to rise up, Yanga and his small group would kill 23 Spaniards who tried to subdue them. After breaking away from the plantation, he led that group of fellow Africans to freedom in the unknown inland wilderness. In the mountains of Veracruz, Yanga and his group formed one of the first palenques, or autonomous communities of escaped slaves. The Spanish were aware that the palenques existed, and so were the slaves. So over time, both groups, the Spanish and any slaves who managed to escape, searched for these hidden communities. Yanga's village grew and thrived by farming and hunting, and sometimes allied with various indigenous groups, even taking in some native people and intermarrying with them. No doubt, Yanga's people learned much.
Shout out to Danny Valencia for the Cash App. Shout out to Evelyn for the Cash App. Shout out to Scoop for the Super Chat. Yeah. Not only am I entertaining you, I am educating you, giving you the facts about hidden history.
About the terrain and about how to grow and harvest local fruits and vegetables from their indigenous neighbors. For the most part, the palenques were pretty self-sufficient, although occasionally Yanga and his followers felt the need to raid Spanish caravans on the Camino Real or Royal Road. This royal highway linked the Gulf Coast with Mexico City and the rest of the central highlands of New Spain. Much merchandise unloaded at the docks at the port of Veracruz was transported overland on this route, and each caravan carried a wide variety of goods. Yanga's people were looking for weapons and anything else that would be useful in their hidden community, such as tools, housewares, and cloth. The raids on the Royal Road were relatively infrequent, so as not to draw too much attention to the palenques. Over time, however, these raids became a small thorn in the side of the Spanish. and got the attention.
Well, I've been giving everybody the facts about this hidden history. A lot of people never knew about Afro Mexicans' existence. They never knew about it because this is hidden history. Think about it. If Mexico kept the black population out of the census for centuries, now you understand why a lot of people just don't know about this, right? They wanted to hide the accomplishments of black people in Mexico. They wanted to erase their contributions to Mexico. Gaspar Yanga fought off the Spanish, defeated the Spanish in several battles. Gaspar Yanga played a major role in Mexico's independence from Spain. This is a fact. But Mexicans don't talk about it. Why? Because this is hidden history that they refuse to acknowledge. This is hidden history that they refuse to talk about. And some of them just flat out don't know. Some of them do know, but they're in denial about it. Because like I said, the ones who do know about the black history of Mexico, they don't want to inform their people about everything that blacks did in Mexico. So it's better for them to pretend like blacks just never existed, or they'll try their best to minimize their contributions to Mexico.
Of the authorities, not only in the colonial capital of Mexico City, but as far away as Spain itself. It was only a matter of time before a formal confrontation would occur. The Spanish took their first formal action in 1609, almost a full 30 years after Yanga led his small group to freedom. In January of that year, an expedition led by Pedro González de Herrera left the city of Puebla. The contingent included some 550 men, of which only 100 were Spanish regulars. Conscripts, mercenaries, and an assorted group of adventurers of various backgrounds made up the rest of Gonzalez's attack force. Yanga gathered together some 500 fighters from his small network of villages. Only 100 had firearms. The rest were to meet the Spanish with machetes, bows and arrows, and stones. The group also used atlatls, the wooden handheld.
They didn't even have guns, man. They had machetes, bow and arrows, and stones. And they defeated the Spanish, and the Spanish had guns. So for you to defeat the Spanish with guns, you had to be a hell of a warrior. You had to be a hell of a soldier. You got a machete, bow and arrows, and stones, and you going up against people with guns? Right. So this is why they never talk about Yanga, because they want to minimize black people's contributions to Mexico. This is why they hid it in history. This is why they never talk about it. Right. So now we understand. Listen, when you're whitewashed by Spanish conquistadors, you're not going to tell the truth about black people contributions in Mexico. You're just not going to do it because you were taught not to.
Spear throwers adopted from the local indigenous people. As Gaspar Yanga was too old to lead his people into battle himself, he named Francisco de la Matosa as the commander of the rebel fighters. Matosa had been captured in Angola by Portuguese slavers and had been transported to Mexico.
See, when you have to resort to trolling in the comment section, it shows how much the truth actually hurts. It just shows how much it actually hurts. You got grown men. Instead of them, well, you can't prove me wrong because I'm giving you historical facts. So instead of them being grown-ups and saying, okay, cool, they resort to trolling and talking stupid in my comment section like a bunch of kids, like a bunch of children. It's not our fault that you don't want to embrace the historical facts. It's not our fault that you refuse to embrace the irrefutable facts. You got so much hatred for black people, so much to the point to where you feel like you got to come to my comment section trolling, as if I'm making up stuff, as if I'm making these things up. I haven't lied about one thing. You could fact check it. You can fact check everything that I said. So you got people trolling in the comment section because they hate the fact that I'm exposing this hidden history. They're windmilling, they're punching the air, they're trolling, they're talking reckless in my comment section.
Was a young boy. Yanga did not think that his people could score a victory against the Spanish, but his strategy was to cause...
Let me tell you something. What's your name? Beast 83. You're nobody, bro. Like, you're nobody. You're trolling in the comment section because you're upset about me giving the irrefutable facts. Go find something to do. We know you hate black people. That's why you hate hearing this history. That's why you're trolling. The fact that I'm exposing this hidden history. You're so You got dudes in their 40s and 50s trolling like a little child because they don't want the truth to come out. It's only so long. Listen, homie, you can only hide the truth for so long. Eventually, the truth will come to the light. The truth has came to the light. Now you got conquistadors trolling in my comment section, claiming to be Mexicans. But in reality, they have the mindset of a Spanish conquistador. They can't accept the facts.
Enough damage to make the Spaniards come to the negotiating table. In the early days of the confrontation, Yanga's people had captured a Spanish soldier and gave him terms to remit to his superiors. Yanga made his demands simple and clear. Number 1, he wanted self-rule of the escaped slave Palenques and recognition of their inhabitants' status as free men. In exchange, the communities would pay the Spanish crown tribute, much as newly conquered indigenous groups had done in the past. Number 2, Yanga promised to aid the Spanish and fight alongside them in case a foreign power attacked New Spain. Number 3, the special self-governing district of former slaves would not take in any new escaped slaves and would return any new escapees to Spanish authorities. Yanga included the last provision in his demands to try to reassure any slave owners in the region who might be worried that Yanga's special autonomous district would encourage future slave revolts and escapes. The Spanish considered carefully the terms of Yanga's peace treaty and refused to grant them. The result was an all-out war. The Spanish found the location of Yanga's principal village and burned it to the ground. At the Rio Blanco, a large battle ensued, with many casualties on both sides.
Look at how mad these people get at me just for telling the truth about history. I never use any racial slurs. I haven't said anything that was racist. They're mad at me for telling the truth about history. That's how mad they are. You trolling my comment section because I'm giving you the facts about history. It shows you how deep their hatred for black people goes. You ain't got to say nothing racist. You ain't got to disrespect them. All you got to do is give the facts about history, and that alone is enough to piss them off. That alone is enough to get them. That is enough for them to start trolling in my comment section and using racial slurs or just disrespecting people. Why? Because they can't handle the truth. They can't handle the truth. You can fact check. Listen, homie, you can literally fact check everything that I've said in this stream. I didn't make anything up. I gave you the irrefutable facts about hidden history. Now deal with it. It ain't my fault that you're mad about it.
The remaining population of the Palenques, the women and children and some indigenous allies, and the rest of the rebel force took to the mountains. Because they knew the terrain well, Yanga and his people waged a guerrilla war against the Spanish. The colonial government in Mexico City sent reinforcements, more regulars and more mercenaries and adventurers, to try to smoke out the rest of the rebel forces, but the best they could do is achieve a stalemate. In 1618, a full 9 years after the fighting began, under a flag of truce, the Spanish sent an emissary to meet with Yanga to discuss terms. In a brief back and forth that lasted only a few weeks, the Spanish agreed to Yanga's original peace treaty with 2 additional provisos. Number 1, the Palenques would have no contact with the outside world except for Franciscan priests who administer to the villages. The settlements would also be open to outsiders on market days. Number 2,
Gaspar Yanga put in so much work that the Spanish had to bring in reinforcements. They had to bring in mercenaries and reinforcements because they was whooping so much ass down there in southern Mexico, defeating the Spanish in so many battles. They brought in several reinforcements, and they still had to negotiate terms with them. Like Gaspar Yanga created a free town for black people where, hey, we don't do this, y'all don't do this. So he fought blood, sweat, and tears. He fought for the people. Gaspar Yanga established a whole city in a village so that black people can be free and not be in shackles, not be enslaved. This was a major slave revolt that took place in Mexico. I heard Mexicans saying, "You guys can fight, man." In Mexico, Gaspar Yanga put on one of the biggest slave revolts and defeated the Spanish in several battles. Do you guys know? Listen, September 1739 in South Carolina, there was a big slave revolt led by a guy by the name of Bemmy. They unalived several slave masters and burned down their plantations. This took place in America, 1739 in South Carolina. A lot of those people fled to Florida. So you talking about a slave revolt in South Carolina in 1739 led by a guy by the name of Jimmy. Then you had Nat Turner. So not only did you have a lot of slave revolts that took place in the United States of America, Gaspar Yanga led the biggest slave revolt in Mexico. But they don't ever want to talk about that. They want to paint the picture like black people were just docile and never fought back and just submitted to the white man's rule. Nah, there were several slave revolts. 1739 in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, to be exact. That was a major slave revolt in 1739, Charleston, South Carolina. And a lot of those runaway slaves in South Carolina, when they unallied the slave masters and burned those plantations, they headed south and went to Florida and blended with the Black Seminoles. I'm going to do a whole story about the slave revolt in South Carolina that took place in 1739. I think I'll do a whole story about that this week.
His family would be granted the right to rule over the special autonomous region in perpetuity. Having a self-governing region of former slaves was unprecedented in the history of the Americas, but the last term in the revised peace treaty essentially established the first and possibly only African dynasty ever to have been established in the New World. The former slaves rebuilt their main village, making it the administrative and commercial center of the new autonomous region. They christened the town San Lorenzo de los Negros de Cerralvo in honor of a Jesuit priest named Juan Lorenzo, who played an important role in the original negotiations in 1609. Although the inhabitants of these free communities swore allegiance to the Spanish crown and the Catholic Church, they never paid the tribute promised in the 1618 peace treaty. The Spanish didn't care as long as the raids on the caravan ceased and all runaway slaves were returned, which did happen. So the Spanish left the area alone. Yanga's villages thrived, growing maize, beans, and mangoes and remaining self-sufficient. Across time, others eventually moved into the area and blended in with the well-established free black communities. In 1932, the town of San Lorenzo de los Negros was renamed Yanga in honor of its founder, and a statue was erected near the center of town soon after. The town and the statue survive to this day. And what of Yanga's legacy? Outside the small area of the Mexican state of Veracruz, very few people had ever heard of Gaspar Yanga until the publication of an anthology in 1870 called El Libro Rojo, or the Red Book in English. The author of the book was Vicente Rivas Palacio, the grandson of Mexico's first black president, Vicente Guerrero. Rivas was the first to dub Yanga the first liberator of the Americas, and brought him into Mexico's national consciousness. Although provisions in the treaty allowed for family succession in ruling the area granted autonomy by the Spanish crown, very little information exists about Yanga's descendants beyond brief reports about his son in the years after the peace settlement. In fact, the modern town of Yanga includes very few people of African descent among its population of 20,000. Researchers theorize that many original settlers of the town of Yanga intermixed with outsiders to a great degree, or they relocated to nearby villages, which still have visible Afro-Mexican populations. These villages are Mata Clara, Cuitahuac, Mata Caña, Cuajilote, and Piedra Gorda, all in the state of Veracruz. Although the physically African population may not exist, or may just exist in trace amounts in the town of Yanga today.
I told you, Mexico has decreased their black population. Black people had no civil rights, so they had to blend in and mix with other people for survival because the black people there had no resources. They didn't even acknowledge these people in the census nor in the Constitution. So this is why a lot of that black population, the black population in Mexico used to be way bigger, but over time the numbers decrease. You know, when you deprive people of civil rights and they lack opportunities, this is what happens. Eventually they fade and die out. You know, so I'm giving you the receipts. The town of Yanga barely has any Afro descendants left. Why do you think? What do you think happened to the Afro descendants? A lot of them died out. No medical, no education, no opportunities. They're not even acknowledged in the census. So if you deprive people of resources and civil rights, eventually they're gonna die out. But if you look at what took place in Argentina, it was worse than Mexico. But don't get it twisted. Mexico did their black population dirty.
The current citizens robustly celebrate their connection to the first liberator of the Americas. Each year since the early 1980s, in the middle of August, the town holds their Carnaval de la Negritud in conjunction with the feast to honor San Lorenzo, which has been the patron saint of the town ever since the days of Gaspar Yanga. The carnival has been growing in popularity over the years and has attracted the attention of tourists, especially African Americans from the United States. Researchers continue to piece together the story of Gaspar Yanga, trying to use primary source material to fill in the blanks of what mostly amounts to oral history, fragmentary historical accounts, and legends. Within the past 10 to 20 years, there has been great interest in Afro-Mexican identity and history, and many feel the need to put Gaspar Yanga in his proper context. For an overview of Africans in Mexico, please see Mexico Unexplained episode number 99, titled Afro-Mexicans, A Hidden Heritage. As mentioned earlier, the story of Gaspar Yanga is still being fleshed out by researchers. Some of the historical literature states that Gaspar Yanga led the first slave uprising in the Spanish colonies of the New World. Only a few keen students of history know that this is not true. The first slave rebellion in the Spanish Americas happened more than 80 years before Gaspar Yanga left his plantation. In October of 1526, a handful of slaves rose up and burned down the home of a prominent colonist in the Spanish settlement of San Miguel de Gualdape. This short-lived colony wasn't even in Mexico. It was located somewhere in modern-day McIntosh County in the state of Georgia in the United States. Few people know of this colony, which not only had the first slave rebellion in Spanish territory in the New World, but was also the site of the first African slaves brought to what is now the continental United States. San Miguel was also the site of the first Catholic Mass on the U.S. mainland. This brief but interesting historical aside in no way diminishes the achievements of Gaspar Yanga and his followers. They were the first to organize a slave resistance in what would become the country of Mexico, and they were the very first group in opposition to the Spanish in the New World to negotiate.
I got somebody that's helping me to work on this documentary. It's called The Hidden History of Afro Latinos. The Hidden History of Afro Latinos, the hidden history of blacks in Mexico. So I'm working on the documentary right now. We're going to drop a lot of receipts about Afro Mexicans and Afro Latinos in general. The hidden history of Afro Mexicans and Afro Latinos. I'm working on that documentary right now.
A treaty of peace with the crown on their own terms, getting everything they wanted. As more researchers fill in the blanks about the life and times of Gaspar Yanga, a more complete picture of this fascinating historical liberator will emerge. Thank you once again for listening to another episode of Mexico Unexplained. Remember to like
multiple people that look like me go through. Believe it, but it really is a thing. It really is an experience that multiple people that look like me go through. Something that I have to deal with my entire life, and that is being Afro-Latina. So what is Afro-Latino? So Afro-Latino basically means a Black person that comes from a Hispanic country. So in my case, both of my parents, my mom and my dad, are both from Panama. Their parents are from Panama, their grandparents are from Panama, and we all Black. All right, we all are physically Black. When I was a young girl, I had to struggle a lot with who I was as a Latina. It was hard for me to identify as a Latina because I was shunned so much. Like even from my own Hispanic community, I was told, "Oh, how do you know Spanish? Like you're too dark to be Panamanian. How are you Panamanian? I don't understand." They couldn't like understand that Black people come from all Hispanic countries. You name it. Every Hispanic country has Black people. It's hard sometimes to have to fight that struggle.
So be on the lookout for the hidden history of Afro-Mexicans and Afro-Latinos, man. I've been working on this for a minute, but I've been doing it behind the scenes. So I got some people that's working with me, and we're going to drop a lot of science on this situation, a lot of knowledge and information.
That I am Panamanian, I am Latina, but other people don't believe me. I remember one story, like in school, because I went to school in Miami. From
Shout out to Danny Valencia for the super chat. Shout out to my man Joseph for the Cash App, and shout out to Donald Willis for the Cash App.
Elementary to 8th grade, and then I moved to New York City, Brooklyn. So when I lived in Miami, I had a class. I had my Spanish class, and it was basically for all the kids that were fluent in Spanish. I remember my 8th grade teacher asked me, looked at all the students, and they all didn't look like me. They were all given Puerto Rican, but they were all light skinned. I was the only dark skinned person in the class, the only Black person. And she stopped the class, she looked at me and was like, "Do you belong in this class? Are you?" She looked at me and was like, "Do you belong in this class? Are you sure that you belong in this class?" And I said, "Yes, I do belong in this class." "Are you sure? Can you say a word in Spanish?" And I did. And she's like, "And what's your name?" I said, "Micah Rosales." "Oh, okay, so yeah, you do belong here." And ever since having that experience, for me, it scarred me because I realized that I was different, that the world viewed me different, that my own people viewed me different. The media doesn't help. You know, a lot of the Latin American roles that you see out there in movies and in commercials, they look like a particular person. They look like J-Lo, they look like Shakira, they look like Sofia Vergara. And it's just not what everybody looks like. And that's why I'm so grateful for people like Amara La Negra, who are using their platform right now to
hit the like button, man. You guys see this, man. Hit the like button, show some love to the content,
to elevate what it is to be an Afro-Latina. You know, and I encourage all Afro-Latinos to continue to have these conversations with people around you. Continue to have the conversations that help elevate who we are.
Yeah, because a lot of people never knew about Afro-Latinos. A lot of people didn't know because Afro-Latinos have no media representation in Latin America. They're not represented in politics. They're not represented in the media. They barely get represented in the census. Mexico barely added their Afro population to the census in 2019. So this right here is hidden history, man. Yeah, this is hidden history. And now that we're bringing this information to the forefront, a lot of people got a problem with it. You see them trolling all in my comment section.
And then let's break barriers. These conversations need to keep on shifting and changing how people view us, and put ourselves out there that we are here, that we exist. And we all come in so many flavors, so many different sizes, so many different colors, so many shades. Like, we are just a melting pot, a rainbow. And that is from every country, from Mexico all the way down to Chile, Argentina, and all the way back, all the Caribbean islands too. So thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't done already, subscribe and like, please. I will appreciate it so much.
Now, shout out to her for doing her thing and sharing her experiences with us. I appreciate all you Afro Latinos who's been sharing your experiences with us, because for so long, for centuries, Latin America has done everything in their power to hide their existence. So yes, man, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I'm working on a documentary called The Hidden History of Afro Mexicans and Afro Latinos. So this is what we are doing, working with people behind the scenes to tell their stories about racism all across Latin America. And that's what we're doing over here, bro. So I got some people who are knowledgeable. I met some people through social media. I met some people in real life. So we're gonna bring that. We're gonna bring that to a theater near. We're gonna bring that. What we want to do is, man, we want to get it on Amazon and we want to put it all over YouTube, man. And yeah, man, it's gonna be a beautiful experience. Shout out to Black Bear, man. I appreciate you for the super chat, my brother. Much love and support. Much love. I appreciate you all for the support. Make sure that you guys bless the like button. It ain't nothing is King Supreme. I got to get up out of here. And I want to give you guys another stream, but I wanted to make this one 2 hours. Peace to everybody for being a supporter. Peace to everybody for being a subscriber. Hit the like button. And make sure, and oh yeah, when this uploads to YouTube, make sure that you guys hype the video. Hype the video when it uploads to YouTube. Peace to everybody. Much love to you all.